was looks like he was in quarantine for quite some time and couldn't make it to the hairdresser, and so he developed quite a long beard. Isn't that right, David?
Yes.
He did. Okay, somehow you're managing to trim your beard, but Martin Buber managed to grow a very impressive beard, unlike me and unlike David Zarno. And he lived from 1878. He was born in Vienna, died in Jerusalem, 1965. Famous philosopher and scholar and all-round mensch by all accounts. Best known for his religious philosophy of dialogue outlined in the book I and Thou. Raise your hand if you have heard of the book I and Thou. All righty, a few people. There's even a few people who are awake. That's impressive. A few people are asleep. I'm going to start calling them out. Look at that. This is only 9:30. Looking at you, Elaine. That's all right. She's getting it subliminally. So, I and Thou is his most famous work, and he is actually a descendant of the Maharam, that's a misspelling, from the 16th century, and was raised by his grandfather, who himself was a scholar of Midrash and rabbinic literature, and he was a relative of Karl Marx, but we're not going to hold that against him. In 1930, he became an honorary professor at University of Frankfurt am Main, but his tenure was cut short when he resigned. Can anyone tell me why he resigned in 1933? Gerald Fleischman, why did he resign in 1933?
Something about Adolf Hitler coming to power.
You got it. He was not impressed by the leadership offered by the despot and anti-Semite, and so he left, and he actually went into Jewish communal work for a while before in 1938 he made Aliyah to Israel and Jerusalem. Of course, it wasn't Israel just yet. And he became a renowned professor at Hebrew University, where he taught in anthropology and sociology and philosophy. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature 10 times, and for the Nobel Peace Prize 7 times. Not sure if anyone else has had that many nominations. David Zarno, do you know? Has anyone had that many nominations?
No, Rabbi, I don't.
Okay.
It's quite remarkable, actually.
It's pretty impressive. And he was a scholar, interpreter, and translator of Chassidic fables. He has a collection known as the Tales of the Hasidim. And he had a tendency to create his own interpretations. His critics would say that he romanticized the Hasidic movement and had a tendency to highlight the positives and ignore some of the more difficult aspects of Hasidic life, Hasidic teaching, and Hasidic practice, which we won't go into right now, but he, as we'll see in some of the texts we'll be sharing, he tends to romanticize a little bit and throw his own interpretations in. I didn't yet see her on the call, but I was introduced to this book, The 10 Rungs, Collected Hasidic Sayings by Martin Buber. I was introduced to this book by our immediate past president at Temple Bat Yam, Patty Seaburn, who is a wonderful poet and scholar. And we've been kind of working our way through this book on and off for a little while, and I really thought that it would be appropriate to share some of it. But as I do that with you tonight, I'm pointing out that it is oldie worldy English, and it's not gender neutral. So I hope no one is offended by that. But we're just going to be using his particular text. So here we go. That was by way of introduction. We're now going to take a look at the text itself. And let's see here. This is the preface that Martin Buber shared to his own book, and it tells us a lot about what he thinks of Hasidic, of the Hasidic stories, and his way of thinking about the lessons that we can draw from them. Let's see here. Bruce Winters, are you able to see the screen okay? Would you like to read a little bit, and we'll stop and start as we go?
Of course. They asked the holy Yehudi, "Why is it written, justice, justice thou shalt follow? Why is the word justice repeated?" He answered, "You ought to follow justice with justice, and not with unrighteousness." That means the use of unrighteousness as a means to a righteous end makes the end itself unrighteous. Injustice as a means to justice renders justice unjust.
All right, thank you. So the holy Yehudi, I put a little footnote here to remind myself, Yaakov Yitzhak Rabinovich, from 1766 to 1813, also known as the Yid HaKadosh, the Holy Jew, and was a founder of a particular sect of Hasidism. And he taught a famous teaching that many of us have heard, that the word justice is repeated in this passage from Deuteronomy. And he answers the question by saying what? Would someone like to summarize? I'm looking for hands raised, or virtually or in reality. Otherwise, I'm going to call on people. David Zano to the rescue. Why does the holy Yehudi say we repeat the word justice? Or why is that repeated in the Torah?
Well, what comes to mind is that you can't do a mitzvah through an avera. You can't do something that is commanded of you through something that is improper. And so you have to use justice. It has to be such that it's not iterative, but it's recursive, that you use justice to bring justice forward. Right,
absolutely. I see the name Eileen Ettinger, but it doesn't look like Eileen is waving her hand.
Again? No, it's her husband, Victor, and it's similar to the end justifies the means.
Well, in fact, it's saying the opposite, isn't it?
That's what I mean. It says the opposite, but it's the same kind of concept, that unrighteousness for righteous purposes is a bad means to get to a good end.
All righty. So let's take a look at what Buber says about that. What knowledge could be of greater importance to the man of our age and to the various communities of our time? Remember, he's writing in 1947, just after the Holocaust, just after World War II. He's come from Austria and now living in Israel. The saying sounds as if it were derived from the experiences of contemporaries. And yet it stems from the Napoleonic era and was not spoken at the hub of events, but in a Polish ghetto, and by a tzaddik, a righteous man, who was the leader of a Hasidim, those devout souls who knew that no one can be really devout in relation to God if he is not devout towards his creation, and that the love of God is unreal unless it is crowned with the love for one's fellow men. So just want to introduce you to the if you go to participants, you have a chance to vote yes or no. It's not really a vote. You can just click on yes or no. Yes, if you think that this idea is relevant to today, the idea that there are folks who are pursuing just causes through unjust means, or no, if you think that's a problem that's been rectified. Is it not only contemporary in 1947, but contemporary in 2020? I'm seeing the yeses go, but no one's clicking on the no's. Oh, someone said no. Okay, just for fun, to show me that it works. Let's have a look at the chat bar. Rob says what Isaiah said. Ah, this is what Isaiah said. There we go. So what is Buber saying? Buber is saying that this particular teaching, which he chose, one of many he might have chosen, is relevant not only in the time of Deuteronomy, not only in the Napoleonic era when the Hasidic master taught it, but in his time, 1947, and I think we would all agree, based on the 40 yeses and the one no, that this is relevant today. All we need to do is, and I'm not getting into politics, for a 501c3, all the rest of it, my usual waiver. But anyone who's seen the news coming out of Midwestern state may know that law enforcement attempts maybe to pursue justice were not done with justice. So we see just right now, there's examples of this. So the Hasidic teachings are relevant today, 1947, and in the past. So let's go back to the text. He also makes the point that no one can really be devout in relation to God if he is not devout toward his creation. That the love of God is unreal unless it is crowned with the love for one's fellow men. Profound teaching, very important. Today as much as any other time in the past, perhaps more. This book contains a small selection of Hasidic sayings of this nature. They all revolve around a single question. Here's the question. How can we fulfill the meaning of our existence on earth? Let that sink in for a second. Jeff, Debbie, is that a simple question?
Talking to you.
Jeff, Podlos? Is that a simple question or a kind of a complicated question?
Complicated.
Thank you. Right answer. How can we fulfill the meaning of our existence on earth? Wow. And so, dear reader, these pages are not concerned with the mysteries of heaven, but with your life and mine in this hour and the next. These sayings were scattered through hundreds of books in versions largely distorted in the speeches and writings of the disciples who transmitted them. I have selected, says Buber, reduced to the quintessence of meaning and arranged them according to major themes, not because they are beautiful and interesting, but because of my belief that in this selection, arrangement, and form, they may serve to show even the reader who is very remote from their origins the way to the true life. So we see Buber being right up front, that he's taking the essence of the stories and making them his own and transmitting them to us in the hope that they will help us find meaning in life and living a life of purpose and of goodness. So let's take a look at a few examples. We saw one example in the preface of the book, but here are a few other texts. We'll see how many we get through in the allotted time. Looking for a volunteer to read. Someone wants to raise their hand to read this text. Otherwise, I will randomly select someone. Okay, Muriel Ash.
Okay. This is how Rabbi Enoch interpreted the words in the scriptures. And the mountain burned with fire onto the heart of heaven. The fire of Sinai burned in the core of men until it made something heavenly of their hearts.
All righty. Muriel, why do you think I selected out of the hundreds of Hasidic teachings in this book something about Sinai burning with fire, the mountain burning with fire? Can you think of why it would be tonight that we would be sharing this?
Obviously, that's the holiday that we are happy about, the giving of the Torah, and we were all together at Sinai.
We are all together at Sinai. There's no coincidences. Absolutely. So the 10 rungs in the book includes one of the rungs is the rung of teaching, and speaks to us about revelation and the place of Torah in our lives. And his first teaching is this teaching from Rabbi Enoch, interpreting a verse from Deuteronomy, Vatikruvun v'tamidun tachat ha'har, you came forward and stood at the foot of the mountain, v'har bo'er ba'esh ad lev hashamayim, choshech anan va'arafel. The mountain was ablaze with flames to the very skies, dark with densest clouds. This English translation from the Tanakh, from Devarim, chapter 4, verse 11, is how it is usually understood. But Rabbi Enoch retranslates the phrase, much like Rabbi Spitz has creatively and beautifully retranslated some of the passages of Psalm 23 that we heard a few moments ago. Ad lev hashamayim, instead of to the very skies, he translates it that the fire of Sinai burned into the core of men until it made something heavenly of their hearts, unto the heart of heaven. Unto the heart of heaven. So how could, this is the question, and I'm going to ask you this question, how could the fire of Sinai burn into our core until it makes something heavenly of our hearts? What does this mean? What is the Torah teaching? What is Rabbi Enoch teaching, the Chassidic master? What is Buber trying to transmit to us about the power of revelation and our hearts? Let's see. I wonder if anyone here, lots of people with their videos off so they can snooze. I'm gonna see if there's randomly someone who happens to be here from Vietnam. Anyone here from Vietnam?
Yeah, but I have work going on in the apartment and I just absolutely can't hear you.
I'm sorry, Jim. Jim Selkin.
I'm typing a chat.
Okay, Jim Selkin all the way from Vietnam, joining us here for Shavuot. It's already daytime Shavuot there. What does it mean that it burns into our core until it makes something heavenly of our hearts? Oh, David Zano, you're on a roll, man.
Well, I would say that it's something that helps us understand how to become godly and how to act as though we were godly to our fellow man and in our lives.
Absolutely. So instead of the flames going up to the heavens, it's that the flames of Torah are coming into our hearts, and we bring something heavenly into the world by acting on the spirit and the intent of the Torah values. Would anyone like to add a thought or a response to that? I see lots of familiar faces and some others as well. Don't be shy. I see Jim Selkin wrote, could fire be a metaphor for awakening, literal and intellectual? They literally were seeing Hashem's power and now as the core reason of being as a Hebrew people. Yes, that's great. Very profound. Ellen Phillips and then Muriel Ash.
I think too that the fire of the Torah, once it is internalized, could actually change your heart. Your heart could evolve and change into something more perfect.
Absolutely. So by doing it, by living it, you change. Your heart changes. Lovely. Muriel Ash. Oops, I unmuted you. There you go. We're playing the mute-unmute game.
I think that it means also that this is not up in the heavens, as it is said. This is something that we can do on earth. We don't have to look to the heaven. It is doable here, that we can have all of the Torah in our hearts. And it doesn't have to be something from up in heaven.
Nice. Very good. So, Rob Greenfeld.
So actually, I'm not sure if it's in the heart. but it's certainly in the brain. And, when we have to think about Torah and think about what's right, it needs to be almost spontaneous. We have to know that in our bodies, what we can feel in our gut, which comes from our brain, what's right and what's wrong. And we were handed the 10 Commandments on Sinai, and it's ingrained in us. I don't know so much about the heart, haven't found it, but certainly it needs to be in your brain. It needs to be a thought process. It has to be rational, and that's what makes you ethical.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, I think I need to school you in anatomy again. Just because you're a cardiologist doesn't mean you should know anything about the heart. What's really interesting is, of course, that in Jewish tradition, the lev, the heart, is not so much the anatomical pump that we think of in medicine and in cardiology, but instead it's the mind. So in fact, by identifying it with the brain, which is not the same as the mind, you're absolutely correct, both anatomically and metaphorically. David Phillips.
To me, it nails down my take on the fire and the smoke and the thunder and the horns and the sounds, the noise was an inadequate attempt, but all attempts are inadequate to convey a transcendental and transformative experience on the part of the people and in their hearts themselves. It's not really about God, it's about what people experienced that day, that place, what we experienced that day in that place, which at its core was kind of nameless and transformative, followed by the law, which is not nameless and transformative. But to me, that's the strength of the Jewish tradition about this mystical experience, is that it has a core of that nameless experience, but it's founded also on how we treat each other, what our rules of community are, etc.
Absolutely. Thank you. Terrific. I'll take one more and then we'll go to the next text, and which will be our final text. Howard Merowitz.
Oh.
I saw your hand up. Was that a long time ago, or you just put your hand up?
That was a long time ago, but
it's great to see you anyway, mate. How are you?
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right. Do you want to add?
I think the passage you quoted.
Yes.
Where it's reinterpreted to look into the heart.
Yes.
But to me, I don't know whether I personally believe what I'm about to say, but just in terms of understanding what the passage seems to be trying to say, that we are all created b'tselem Elohim.
Mm.
And so the way to, what we need, what the passage is asking us to do is look deeply into ourselves and into our own hearts to try to find that tselem, the tselem Elohim that will connect us to heaven, to God. And thereby, that when we can find that, we will create the meaning of our life, not fulfill it. Nobody is going to say, here, go fulfill this. This is the meaning of your life. We have to figure out that meaning from nothing.
Nice.
But there isn't nothing, there is b'tselem Elohim. That's what you have to work with to create the meaning.
Thanks, Howard. Lovely. I see Doris's iPhone XS said to everyone, I feel the Torah permeates our souls through the flash of fire in our hearts. Beautiful. Let's go to the last text with, I like Rabbi Cohen, would have been happy to teach for longer than 30 minutes, and I got plenty of material, but we'll jump to the last teaching that I prepared, which is Buber's Hasidic story on modern inventions, where he writes, you can learn from everything. The rabbi of Sadagora once said to his Hasidim, everything can teach us something, and not only everything God has created. What man has made has also something to teach us. What can we learn from a train, one Hasid asked dubiously. That because of 1 second, one can miss everything. And from the telegraph, that every word is counted and charged. And the telephone, that what we say here is heard there. So my last question for us is, what can we learn from today's modern inventions? Zoom, Safaria, which is the online program I'm using to share this text with you, PowerPoint, that I used before to show you these wonderful images. What can we learn from all these wonderful inventions? Would someone like to jump in? And one might add, what can we learn from the experience we're going through, this crazy time of COVID? Yeah, Bonnie.
Oh, you unmuted me. Okay. They're all tools to communicate. We're using them now because we have so few other ways to communicate in person. And that's what they are. They're tools to communicate.
Rabbi Peter Levy added, Zoom we learn from, we often speak and no one hears because we're on mute. I like that. Very rabbinic, Peter. It's a reminder that we may be physically distant, but we don't have to be socially distant, right? We can be together even when we are far apart. We have folks here from Oregon, from Vietnam, from around Orange County. And yeah, we don't have cheesecake and we don't have hugs. We can't shake hands, but we're here together, coming live and being able to interact. Let's see, Adolfo says, innovation stretches our understanding of how we can do things. Prayer was an innovation to the loss of the temple. That's a great point. Susan Seeley said, we learn that we are ever adaptable, ever evolving, ever learning, as well as ever longing for communication and community, and that we will continue to do so by any means at hand. Our technology will keep up with our relational needs. Yes, the need for community. Remember, synagogue is a Beit Knesset, a place of meeting. Doesn't have to be necessarily in person anymore, because we have so many innovative ways of doing it. We can be all together. And so on this Erev Shavuot, as we stand again together at Sinai, I hope the fire of Torah energizes us and we bring some of heaven down. We find ways to bring godliness and that Selam Elohim into everything we do and everything we interact with, whether it's something ancient or whether it's something brand new. Wishing you all Chag Sameach, be healthy, be safe, and stay sane.
Yasher Koach, Rabbi Gersh, thank you so much. And Yasher Koach to everybody who shared their Torah. Up next, we have a duo, a partner.
Erev Tov, everyone, Chag Sameach.